Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me start out by responding to a viewer we had yesterday. We had a viewer, and I don't have that soft skin, I think you'll see as I say this, but he referred to me as a fat hillbilly. So I thought I would actually respond to that. One, there is definitely a lot of me to love. I ain't gonna deny that. Now my goal is to become half the man I used to be. And if you started watching this roughly about a year before the Civil War, actually, when trade out of Florida, you got to remember we're such a sandy state that the roads were not muddy as much as they were sandy, especially in North Florida where I come from. And the only thing that would get through that sand was oxen, not horses, but oxen-drawn wagons. And the people from Florida delivering up north, they would move these oxen with a long, thin whip. And the whip wouldn't actually be hitting the oxen, it would crack, make a cracking sound right behind their ear, and that would keep them going. So they would say, "Here come the Florida crackers." Anyway, a little bit of history from this fat hillbilly, I guess. So I'll wear that with pride, sir. Thank you very much. Let's get right into it. Our first story comes from over the pond, as we say, from jolly old England, London to be specific, as Donald Trump, and this is from Politico, and the article says, Donald Trump plays Brexit kingmaker. And if you don't know what Brexit means, you've been living under a rock, let alone a hill. But Brexit is basically the vote that was taken almost 3 years, I guess 3 years ago now, for England, the EU, the UK to leave the EU, get all confused, the UK, EU. So for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union, and the citizens of the UK voted to leave. And basically there's been a kind of a natural alliance between MAGA people, Trump supporters, and the Brexit people, because we're all trying to essentially drain the swamp and put our countries where they should be in the forefront. So President Trump has certainly been an ally to people who have been behind the Brexit movement, the people themselves, the people of England. All right, so let's get right to it. Donald Trump plays Brexit kingmaker, according to Politico. Donald Trump is using his UK state visit to anoint Brexit winners and losers, according to Politico. The president on Tuesday fully cast his lot, with political leaders pushing for Britain to crash out of the European Union and in the process trample on diplomatic norms that foreign policy leaders generally avoid meddling in domestic politics. Well, I would call 3 years plus hardly crashing out of the EU. It looks to me like they're going, unless you consider a snail a crash victim, it's a snail's pace. They're going out of the EU. The old guard is desperately trying to hang on, much like they are here, by the way. But trampled, I like this term, trampled on diplomatic norms. Well, that probably is true. Donald Trump tramples on a lot of norms, and thank God for it. That's one of the reasons, by the way, that we voted for him. Us MAGA hat, dregs and deplorables out here, sons of guns. That's what we voted for. We didn't vote for go along, get along, happy-go-lucky. We voted for a man that would drain the swamp. And the swamp is not just the old swamp here in the great USA, but the worldwide swamp. And President Trump has taken on that mantle as world swamp drainer, not just USA swamp drainer. But so we'll move along here. Britain is especially fragile. According to this article, Britain is especially fragile at the moment, with Prime Minister Theresa May set to step aside in the coming days, casting doubt on how or even if the United Kingdom will leave the EU. So they're questioning whether the will of the people will even be carried out. That is how hardcore the swamp is in England, the EU, and even here in the United States. The establishment political figures of the world, they want to hold on to power so much, they talk about, oh, we got to save our democracy. except for when you vote the wrong way. Then we can't have it. We got to have another vote. That's what they want to do in England, by the way, another vote. But I love this term. Britain is especially fragile. Is it? If true, as the Democrats over here say, then it's a damn shame. If England, the UK is fragile over leaving the EU, man, if you're a citizen of that great country, you got to be really saddened to believe that. Because think about it, man. Your nation, your island nation, England, and the UK in general, has survived, just to name a few, has survived Roman occupation, has survived the Viking horde, if you will, and has survived the Nazis as we lead up to the D-Day celebrations over the next couple of days. So to think that England has survived all of that, including a revolution from the United States of America, and now is fragile simply because the majority of the people in the UK voted to leave the European Union? I mean, if true, it is a sad commentary. But Trump barreled into the Brexit quagmire on Tuesday. It's not a quagmire. It's only a quagmire because they don't want to accept the will of the people. That's why we have, quote, so much division here in the United States, because they want, the establishment rats of both parties won't accept the will of the American people. And over in the UK, they won't accept the will of the citizens of the United Kingdom. If you just accept the will of the people, there would be no quagmire. In just a matter of a few hours, talking about the president, he snubbed the leader of the opposition who wants a close relationship with the EU after Brexit. And if he can't get it, advocates a second referendum. We'll talk more about this fella in a moment. But so this guy that is the leader of the Labour Party, basically, and that Trump supposedly snubbed, well, he wants a close relationship with the EU, and he's opposed to Brexit. So why would Donald Trump meet with him? In favor, of course, of meeting two avid Brexiteers and chatting with a third. So he met with Nigel Farage and he chatted with Boris Johnson over the telephone. Chatted. I love how the English speak. Trump is very interested, and this is according to Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage. Trump is very interested as to who the next conservative leader and prime minister is. Nigel Farage says, now I would like to see Nigel Farage as the next prime minister. I don't even know if he's actually going to run, but if he would have my vote if I could cast one. On Tuesday, Labour Party leader, and this is the one that Trump didn't meet with, Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn turned down a visit to a lavish state banquet at Buckingham Palace the night before, saying that the U.S. president did not deserve the honor. Instead, he delivered an anti-Trump screed at a massive rally. You gotta take that massive rally with a little suspect, because sometimes they over dramatize these rallies. Then less than a mile away from the president's joint press conference with Prime Minister Theresa May. If you saw that press conference, I thought the president handled it very well. I thought Ms. May handled it pretty well as well. But it's this Jeremy, what is his name? Let me get his name right here. I want to make sure I say it. Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn. I have to admit, I don't know that much about him, but from what I've been reading in this article and some of my research, it seems that we have a contender for King Swamp Rat of the UK, because we already have King Swamp Rat here. Make no mistake, our official, at least from my dubbing of King Swamp Rat, is Mitt Romney. And a side note always, you great citizens of the state of Utah, please recall Romney now. Do our nation a great service and start a Recall Romney the Rat right now. But it seems like this Corbyn fella is definitely a contender for King Swamp Rat in the UK. The opposition leader, let's a bit more about Mr. Corbyn. The opposition leader said he would fight with every last breath to prevent American companies from carving up the UK state healthcare system and National Health Service. I don't know that much about the story, but basically it's about if the UK goes back to being an independent nation, that American medical companies would go over and compete with socialized medicine service for people over there, and some people are opposed to that. And according to this article, this met with cheers from the crowd. He attacked Trump over his policies on immigration, climate change, reproductive rights, and international cooperation. I'm sure he did, and I'm sure there were quite a few that cheered it. It goes back to what I've been telling you all along, and this doesn't matter whether the United States of America or jolly old England, progressives, baby. Check. If you don't get anything outside of the show, get this. Progressives cannot be reasoned with, cannot be dealt with, cannot be compromised with. Progressives can only be defeated at the ballot box. That's it. That's period, man. Asked about the comments at a press conference, Trump said Corbyn had asked him to meet, and I told him no. That's classic Trump, man. So Trump added, I don't know Jeremy Corbyn, never met him, never spoke to him. I think that he is somewhat of a negative force. I think that people should look to do things correctly as opposed to criticize. I got news for you, Mr. Corbyn. If you better learn this, don't pick a fight with Donald Trump, man, unless you're ready to bring your A game. Because Trump don't back down, Daddy. He ain't a back down guy. He is a counter puncher. He may not always throw the first punch, but if any punches are thrown, you can believe that DJT will come back at you. Bat, bat. I mean, that's just the way he is. And I know there's one or two of us out there that actually appreciate that about him. Back to the article, Billy Bob tells me. If you haven't met my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob Bass, he keeps me straight here on the show. I guess that shows just how, I don't know about a hillbilly, but how crazy I am, because I'm a fish whisperer. Yeah, I'm a salty dog, man. I go fishing pretty much all the time on the weekends out in the Gulf of Mexico. That's why I look so red. I don't need a nurse. I got one. I'm married to one. Gave me this cup, by the way. I want you on my side of the wall. That's what it says. But back to the article. He has, Billy Bob, before I move on, he has a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1. Mine is at John Martin Talks. The U.S. and the U.K. have long proclaimed a special relationship exists between the two countries. Trump used the phrase liberally and warmly during his remarks, proclaiming the greatest alliance the world has ever known. And I think overall that's probably a true statement. Now, this actual phrase special relationship pretty much has been stated by most presidents, if not all, since World War II. And I've heard reports, I've yet to be able to totally confirm them, so I want to put a little grain of salt on this, the old salty dog as they say, that this term special relationship, that Obama was reluctant to use that. In fact, there are reports, and I heard one on Fox News, saying that he refused to actually use that phrase, which is interesting. Because as I've told you before, President Trump has assumed the mantle of not only commander-in-chief, but leader of the free world. Obama rejected that term, basically. He saw himself as part of a chorus, not the leader of a free world, but maybe as part of a chorus in the free world. But officials and diplomats quietly acknowledged these ties are frayed between the U.S. and England. I don't know if that's true. Strained by Brexit and Trump's election. So strained by the will of the people. Corbyn's rise to power would almost certainly further test the relationship's strength still further. Now, it's really interesting to me, and I'm not going to get too deep into it because this article is fairly long and I have edited it quite a bit for your convenience. But apparently this Corbyn guy is rising. He's a leader of the Labour Party, but most people really don't think he has a chance to be the next prime minister at this point, including the Trump White House. But of course, the press, especially Politico that I'm reading from here, is going to elevate anybody to the left to the extreme because they are joined at the hip. The leftist progressive movement, not only in the United States and the UK, but around the world, and the World Press Corps are joined at the hip. Make no mistake about it. But it said Corbyn's rise to power would almost certainly further test the relationship still further. So people, let me get this straight. What they're saying here, people in America elected Donald Trump. Love him, hate him. He's still your president, Snowflakes. Get over it. But the people of America elected Donald Trump, and the people of the UK voted for Brexit. And this causes ties to fray. How? It sounds to me like if they elect the right person now to prime minister, that our ties will actually be even closer especially with the re-election 2020, baby, of DJT. So I don't know about this press. I think they're wishful thinking at best. Some of Labor's criticisms of Trump on the Iran nuclear deal, on climate change, on the importance of multilateral bodies like the United Nations are shared by the conservative government and are making the transatlantic relationship more difficult. So they're saying that a lot of Trump's policies are opposed by both the conservative and the Labor Party in England. And that may in fact be true, but the translation, you know what the translation of that is? The establishment is opposed to Trump and Brexit and any attempt to drain the swamp. These are my words. Any attempt to drain the swamp both here in the United States, in the UK, in the EU, and literally worldwide, as we've seen in places like India and Australia and Brazil, elections that have happened there that have been people who say are that Trump influenced, so to speak. The swamp is deep, man. The swamp has been growing in this world and these countries like ours for a millennia now. And especially over in the EU, man, that is an old, stinky, nasty swamp over there. And they don't want to be drained. But a labor official said, of course, all these people that speak out like this, they always seem to have to be anonymous, man. Labor officials said, I imagine everybody would notice we have a tangible change, talking about if Corbyn were to get elected. We have different policies and different priorities from the current government. Then again, the official added, we could have, and I love this part, we could have Bernie, the left-wing Democratic presidential hopeful, would likely be a much more comfortable fit for Corbyn premiership. You think? So that tells you all you really need to know about Corbyn is that he would get along well with Comrade Bernie. They would be comrades. Maybe they could, like, I don't know if Corbyn is married or not, but maybe they could join together and renew their vows in Kiev or Moscow or somewhere, or St. Petersburg. I mean, they go back to Russia, Putin. I mean, they could have a Siberian vacation, right? But that's all you really need to know about Corbyn and the Labor Party is that they would get along well with a President Bernie Sanders. Let's hope none of that nightmare comes to pass. All right, speaking of the Democrats, although Bernie's not really one, we're going to talk about this supposed debate that's happening in the Democratic Party. You know, the end of this month in Miami, they're going to have 2 debates. I think they're going to start on June 27th. Don't hold me to that. But it's the end of the month. They're going to have 2 of them because the field is so big. I guess they'll have the top tier and the lower tier. Maybe they'll divide them up 50-50 somehow. I don't really know. But leading up to this debate, we got a couple of stories that are tied into this. The Democrats are trying to separate themselves from the 2020, which is now 24 in the 2020 field. But here's from The Hill. This article comes from The Hill. Shots start to fly ahead of first Democratic debate. Democratic candidates for president are increasingly throwing barbs and exchanging shots with one another ahead of their first debate in just 3 weeks. So in other words, it's getting hot up in here where so much of us all jammed together, man. It's like they're in a subway car or something and they're all starting to stink and sweat. So they're getting hot. They're going to fight a little bit. Senator Kristen Gillibrand of New York and South Bend, Indiana, Mayor Pete I always get trouble with that, Buttigieg or whatever. Mayor Pete, I'll try to simplify it, took aim at one another over former Senator Al Franken, Democrat from Minnesota's resignation. You remember old Al Franken? That was, I guess he was channeling his Biden as he was going around. Excuse me while let me feel you out, gal. Let me see where you stand politically, that kind of thing. But apparently, Gillibrand and Mayor Pete are like a little bit at odds over what should have happened with Franken. But Buttigieg is implicitly criticized Gillibrand by saying he wouldn't have pressured Franken to resign over sexual misconduct allegations based on what was known at the time. So we got a cat fight, man. We got a cat fight going on by Mayor Pete and Kristen Gillibrand. And it made me think about this. You know, we got the MAGA hats. Mine actually says make fishing great again, by the way. But now we got a new campaign. It sounds like the Democrats are doing. I call it the MAFRA, MFRA. Make Franken relevant again, because who even knows how Franken is at this point? Is he's like one of the people? I mean, Who even cares what Al Franken says? Do even people where Al Franken is from in Minnesota actually give a darn what he thinks right now? Al Franken is totally irrelevant from what I can see. But Gillibrand was the first senator to call for Franken's resignation last year, and she's been criticized by some Democrats for doing so. Here's what she says. For my part, I chose to stand by 8 women. She said this on a SiriusXM show called Signal Boost Tuesday. A day after Buttigieg's initial comments on MSNBC Town Hall, this is where he criticized Gillibrand. Gillibrand said, I would stand by those women again. I value women, so my position is really clear. Yeah, it's really clear. You're part of that anti-man campaign. You're with Mazie Hirono that all men should just do the right thing and shut up. Well, I tell you what, we ain't doing it. Old white Captain Whitebread here, man, as long as I've got breath in my lungs and ability to get on this air, and I really appreciate you listening, by the way. People like on Citizens for Trump, Deplorable Resistance, my John Martin Talks Facebook page. Please, if you hadn't done it already, go there, like it directly, share it with others. Other places like Media Measures. We got multiple sites we're broadcasting from now. So as long as I have the ability to get on this and air and you keep listening, which I appreciate it, I hope you continue to do so, I'm not going to shut up, and I'm going to be counted upon. But Gillibrand is like anti-man. How's that going to work where basically you run against 50% of the population? Because in Gillibrand's case, she's not talking about just old white dudes that Oprah said we all just need to go die. She's talking about men in general, man. No wonder she's polling below like anyone else, as it says. Senator Bernie's not to be outdone by the catfight between Buttigieg and Gillibrand. Senators Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, and Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, have taken swipes at none other than former Vice President, sleepy Uncle Joe, as Trump calls him, Joe Biden, over Biden's willingness to attend high-dollar fundraisers with Wall Street supporters. Warren also took a shot at Biden over his willingness to work with Republicans. You know, more and more it seems like they're trying to paint Joe Biden as just another Hillary Clinton. Because that basically Biden seems to be running the same kind of campaign that Hillary ran in the general election. How'd that work out for her? You might end up, Joe, being president of California, even though you were no-show this weekend. But let me just ask you this. What should the first debate stage actually look like? Should it be right now, if they had one, would it be like Joe up on a pedestal, everybody going, ah? Would it be Biden by himself with a cutout of everybody? I don't know. What's that first debate? Because you got Biden and not Biden. I mean, basically, that's what the Democratic, if you want to simplify the Democratic primary at this stage, it's Biden versus anybody but Biden. I mean, that's what it looks to me like. But over the weekend, the California Democratic Convention, several Democratic candidates sparred over socialism. We talked about that over the last couple of days. Check out our podcast. The best way to do that is go to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others, but check it out. We got a new website coming up very soon as well. But they debated, they sparred over socialism. How'd that go, by the way? Well, some of them got booed, chewed, and whatever. After former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper said that socialism is not the answer. What was the question, by the way? If socialism is not the answer, what's the question? If the party wants to defeat President Trump, Washington Governor Jay Inslee fired back at, so this guy, Jay Inslee, Washington Governor, and former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper got in a little fight back of us. I would call, I've been trying to help the Democrats with their primaries and getting them divided. Between these two guys, I would call it the who dat versus the who dis primary, because nobody outside of maybe Colorado and Washington know who Hickenlooper or Inslee is. They don't know it. I guarantee you. I could walk around my neighborhood right now and say, have you ever heard of Hickenlooper? And they'd go, who? Who dat? And if I said, well, how about Inslee? They go, who dis? That'd be the name of that primary. But Jay Inslee, the governor, said, I am governor who doesn't think we should be ashamed of our progressive values, to whoops and cheers from a liberal audience out in California. So I would ask Mr. Inslee, okay, you're not ashamed of your progressive values? Well, what should you be ashamed of? Like making the baby comfortable before you kill it? There ain't no shame in that game, is there? They celebrating it in New York, probably out in Washington, especially in Seattle, which I heard, by the way, is becoming is falling in line with the other California cities. In Washington, I've heard that Seattle is just falling apart from friends of mine that go out there pretty regular. But back to the article here. The battles are hardly surprising in a 24 candidate race. 24, man. And it might even grow. Race that is just beginning to take shape. Just beginning to take shape. What kind of shape are they taking? Like the Russian signal? You want to talk about Russia, Russia, Russia? Look at the comrades to Putin in the Democratic Party. Because I can guarantee you that President Trump is so far removed from like Russia compared to like the Bernieites and Bill de Blasio, man, that are just plain communists, pure and simple. I mean, they're not even socialists, they're communists. And keep in mind, if you're thinking about voting for any of these yahoos in the 2020 race on the Democratic side, keep in mind what I've been saying all along. You can vote yourself into socialism, but look what's happening in Venezuela. You always got to shoot your way out. So, and who has the Second Amendment at heart? So keep that in mind. Anyway, I'm not advocating violence. I'm merely commenting on the truth. If true, which it is, you vote into socialism, but show me where you hadn't had to shoot your way out, man. But the latest sparring mostly reflects two dynamics, according to this article, in the emerging primary fight. Well, I can tell you what the dynamics of this fight are. It's the who is the hugest, or to say Donald Trump, to say bigly, who's doing the leftist the most hugely bigly way? Who is the biggest lefty of the bunch? That's what they're really trying to figure out right now. Because if you're not a hardcore lefty, well, they boo. I mean, you know, California booed them, man. One is the need, according to the article, one is the need for candidates such as Sanders and Warren to take Biden down a peg. Take old Joe down. Don't worry, Joe's going to take himself down at least a couple of pegs, I guarantee it. As a result, candidates are going to be under pressure to step up their attacks on Biden to try to bring him back to the pack. They want to bring him back to the pack, man. There's a lot of reference to like following the lead dog in the Democrats lately. I guess is what the bottom line is. They don't want to look at the lead dog's ring, let alone kiss it. Separately, more than half the candidates are struggling to get out of the gate. So there's like Biden versus the rest, and a lot of these are going, hey, look at me. Those Democrats need to make headlines to find any traction at all, and battling with other candidates is one way to do it. Well, it sounds like that if you think herding cats is tough, herding jackasses is a whole lot harder. Because make no mistake, this is the jackasses on jackasses party. Green New Deal. Yeah, so you can't ride a plane, a fast train, or a car to go around all 57 of the states that Obama campaigned in order to make just the 50 that the rest of us live in. You're going to have to ride on a really fast jackass. Good luck. Hickenlooper's remarks about socialism might not have gone over well with many progressive voters, you think? But they won him attention and might win him some votes down the road, according to this article. Nah. He ain't gonna win no votes by saying we don't need to be saying. As a matter of fact, he'll probably lose some. Still, the short words can also come with downsides. So there's downsides to beating each other up. And they refer to the campaign between Bernie and the Hildebeest, man. The bitter primary battle. I love how they describe it. Always bitter. The bitter primary battle between Sanders and 2016 Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton left bruised feelings and some of Sanders' supporters at home on election day. Some of them even voted for Trump. Imagine that. But bitter. Was it really bitter between the two of them? I mean, I remember the debate where Bernie was like defending. He didn't take on Hillary. He defended her, saying, I'm sick and tired of hearing about your email. Go ahead and bleach them. And here, I got a hammer for you. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a sickle. Go ahead and chop them cell phones up, man. But Bernie didn't appear to be too bitter about it after he lost, did he? I mean, I hate to break it to you Snowflake Bernie supporters out there. Bernie totally sold out after the election. Now, some of you, and I think rightfully so, may have felt bitter. You may have not supported Hillary. You may have stayed home. You may have supported other candidates. I don't blame you for that at all. But Bernie himself, he wasn't bitter. He went and made millions off of this thing. He switched back to the independent party and back and forth. I mean, Bernie's not bitter. Bernie's a sellout, man. He is establishment, I hate to tell you. But one thing for sure about Bernie Sanders, he is a swamp rat establishment candidate. This idea that he's some kind of lone maverick, other than the fact that he's an identified communist, that's the only thing that makes him maverick. But make no mistake, he is a hardcore establishment person. Keep in mind, I haven't talked about this in a while, but keep in mind that Bernie did not support Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez until after she won. He didn't get behind her in her primary against a 26-year, I think it was, incumbent in Crowley. Bernie was supporting Crowley. And it wasn't until Ocasio-Cortez won in a district that Nancy Pelosi said a glass of water could have won, that the Democrat was in, that Bernie jumped on Ocasio-Cortez's bandwagon. Not the other way around. So keep that in mind, you Bernites out there and you Ocasio-Cortez people, that Bernie is really not your guy, even though you probably going to vote for him. Democratic strategist Eddie Vail, at least this guy's on the record, I guess he's looking for a job, said the sharp exchanges are totally normal, talking about the jabs, the barbs, the cat fights between the Democrats, totally normal and expected, and expects the party to come together in the end to defeat that in the that work. Went on to say this Democratic strategist, and that's normal, talking about these barbs back and forth, and healthy to have that debate. These fights will also strengthen the candidates and show who can give and take a punch. Getting ready for the punch of Donald Trump, I guess. If you can't deal with some criticism in the Democratic primary, you certainly aren't ready to go toe-to-toe with Trump. And hey, I agree with Mr. Vail completely. If you're not ready to go, if you can't beat this field, then you sure can't beat Trump, man. And I don't know who's going to beat Trump. I hope nobody. But let me just ask you this: do you see any you Democrats out there? Let me ask you, progressives. I And who could go with it? Maybe Liz, maybe old Pocahontas, what I call a Liawapa, Elizabeth Warren, the whitest woman in America, because she's kind of nasty. Maybe she could do it. How about Get Shorty, otherwise known as Mayor Pete? I mean, this dude's going to be like, Trump's going to be like here, and Mayor Pete's going to be like, hey, man, I'm down here. I'm not against short people by any stretch, because compared to my dad, but Mayor Pete's only about 5'2", right? Statistics show that that's just not going to happen, but we'll see. We'll see. The GOP primary fight he talks about in 2016 was one of the nastiest on record. I love how they call that nasty. You know why it was nasty? Because Donald Trump refused to roll over, spoke the truth to the American people, was uncharacteristic, unpresidential, and as I can tell you right now, they don't get the